So good afternoon, everybody. It's if you are here, that's probably this afternoon. I hope you are here for the first primer that we organized to better prepare applicant for the ASA Academic Scholar Award. It's like promotion. My advice is for people is to attend maybe 1 year or two before they want to do it, and then the year they are doing it to pay attention to different things. But because it's the first time, it's very possible that many of you, not all of you, are planning to apply this year. I will talk. Alistair Flint is a vice chair of research, and I hope all of you know him, and is going to introduce the background on the ASA award, and then talk about ASA for researcher, followed by Sanjeev Sokalingam, will talk about ASA for people interested in CPA, education, or the intersection educational CPA. And then Krista Langto would make some comment for ASA special consideration for those of you who are what's called by U of T status only, which typically means you have a PhD. And I will then make some general comment, talking a little bit about the experience over the past few years and what we have seen in people who are successful and people who are not successful. And then there should be about 35 minutes left for questions. So without further ado, Dr. Flint, Vice Chair of Research, is going to now take the mic for the next 35 or 40 minutes. And I'm going to mute myself. And last point, we're going to record this meeting so that people who have a schedule constraint and cannot attend can attend. And also if somebody is thinking of applying next year and want to see this program in June, they can see it in June. The recording will be put on the YouTube channel of the Department of Psychiatry. If you don't want to be recorded, turn your camera off and turn your mic off. You can also rename yourself. But if you, and on the other hand, when you ask question during the second part, there will be no question during the first part. All the question will be during the last 45 minutes. If you want to ask question, try to turn your camera off. Tell us in one sentence who you are and whether you are planning to apply this year in the future, or you don't know and you're exploring whether applying is the right thing for you. So, and for instance, the reason we want you to mute yourself is because earlier there was a background noise, somebody taking a shower or being near a lake or a river. So, for instance, there is somebody called Laws, L-A-W-S, who is not muted, and you should mute yourself. And we don't know who you are because you don't have a first name. I don't know if Laws is your, and unless Chris, you can mute people. If you're the administrator, I don't know if you can do that.
Yeah, I think that's Sam Law. I can't. I've muted everyone I can, but unfortunately, it won't let me mute him.
It's Sam here.
Yeah,
I actually don't have a microphone, so it's just a false alarm.
Okay.
Well, you have a microphone because we can hear you and you're not muted. So,
yes.
But anyway, if you have a microphone on your device, no, that's not Sam Law. Sam Law is, there is somebody else called Laws, L-A-W-S, on my screen.
That is me. I apologize because I have to use two devices. One is to listen and the other one's for visual. So you won't hear from me. Don't worry.
Oh, I understand what you're saying now. Okay, no, but I'm not picking on you, by the way, I apologize. But sometimes people don't realize, and since we're recording, it created a lot of background. But I think now the sound is very good. Everybody has muted themselves. Thank you very much. I will mute myself. Alistair, you're on. And I've not seen the message that we are started to record, because normally it should appear. But Chris, are we recording from now?
Yeah, we're recording, but we will clean it up to a certain point.
Okay, fine. So let's start. I didn't see the message, so it's a warning that we're recording. Alistair, you're on. Thank you.
Thank you. Right. Are the slides visible to everybody? Yep, great, fantastic. Okay, so what I will be doing for the first 20 minutes or so is just giving an overview of the ASA. And then after that, we'll be moving into tips for various planks of application for, as Benoit said, initially for research, education, CPA, and then special issues pertaining to status only. So just in terms of starting in, okay, so this won't, let me see if this will progress. Here we are. So just the background. So the ASA come from Department of Psychiatry funds. And these were funds that previously had been put aside as salaries to certain members of the department, historically to certain members of the department, as what they were called geographic full-time, which was a university definition. But several years ago, the decision was made to convert the salaries into merit-based stipend awards that would be competitive and would be weighted towards more junior faculty with the goal of supporting academic time for people to reach promotion. So these are merit-based awards. So they're based on an application and competition and review. And the purpose, the goal is professional development of full-time faculty. The overarching goal being of academic promotion to either associate or full professor. And because it's the difficult time is early on in one's career in terms of getting funding to support time and other funding such as operating funds and so on, we decided to weight the awards towards early career faculty to enable them to get to associate professor status. And then there are some awards available for associate professors who have not had an award as an assistant professor, and then, as I'll come to, up to a couple of awards each year for full professors under certain circumstances. The awards are for scholarship, so either in research or scholarship in educational CPA, and they're not designed for clinical activity, teaching or administration. So essentially, they are designed to support additional time to the time people already have to support their scholarship and academic activity. In terms of eligibility, one has to be a full-time member of the department and have a primary appointment in psychiatry. So there are some people who have primary appointments in other departments and have a secondary appointment or a cross appointment to psychiatry. But in order to be eligible for these awards, since the funds are Department of Psychiatry funds, you need to have a primary appointment in psychiatry to be eligible. We also decided to have a rank of assistant professor or higher. And so this would exclude people at the lecturer rank. And the reason for doing this was really, again, the focus is on allowing people to get additional time to help them get promoted. And really, in terms of the people who are at a level of scholarship that allow them to do that, to get promoted to more senior promotion, are people starting out as or already now assistant professors or at a higher rank. It's available to both the clinical and the status only faculty. And Dr. Langto will be giving more details about some of the special considerations for status only faculty. And the other stipulation is that if you're clinical faculty, you have to be a member of a conforming practice plan of one of the fully affiliated Taschen hospitals. This does exclude people who aren't a member of a Taschen hospital. And again, we can, if there are questions about this, we can discuss this in the discussion period. But there are reasons for this in terms of Taschen hospitals, their practice plans contributing to funds in the Department of Psychiatry. If you have a funded chair, either an endowed chair or a professorship to support your time, this will be an exclusion as well, because if you have that sort of funding already, then we felt that the funds that are available through the ASA should be distributed to people who do not already have that type of funding for their academic time. And the last stipulation for eligibility is to have a maximum of 3 attempts to obtain the ASA. And this is consistent with, for example, applying for research grant awards from some federal agencies. In terms of the amount and duration of the awards, if you're an assistant professor, the original award is for 3 years, based on an academic, based on review of performance every year. And if you have adequate performance, then you're eligible for renewal of another 2 years. So if you get the renewal, the total award will be for a period of 5 years. And the amount for an assistant professor is $50,000 per annum. In order to facilitate people's work towards promotion and not to work as any disincentive for promotion, this past year we altered this slightly to allow for people who get promoted within the 5-year term as an assistant. And so previously, essentially, if someone got an award as an assistant professor, they would have the 5 years and, as I say, the 3 years plus 2-year renewal. And now, if someone gets promoted to an associate professor within the first 3 years of their award, then for the 4th and 5th years, the award would go up to $60,000, which is the amount that would be available to an associate professor who gets the award. And in addition, there would be an additional 6th year as an associate professor, which, or in the associate professor level, for another $60,000. So $333,000 in total. So this acts as an incentive for people to get promoted within that 5-year period. Now, if people get promoted in the 2-year renewal, so the first 3 years they're still an assistant, but in the second 2-year period they get promoted to associate, then in their final, they get a final year, a 6th year, and that's $60,000. So again, as an incentive for promotion and not to disincentivize people who do get promoted during the period of the award. If you're an associate professor, it's a fixed term. So you're eligible to apply for an ASA as an associate professor if you have not received it as an assistant professor. And it's a fixed term of 3 years. There's no renewal, and it's $60,000 per annum for those 3 years. And again, there is an annual review of performance. And finally, there are 1 to 2 awards per year, depending on the funding each year, for a full professor, and again, $60,000 up to 2 years. And this is now limited to full professors who have served on the senior advisory committee and who have completed their term on the committee and are now transitioning back to more time spent in research or educational CPA scholarship. And so it's really to facilitate that transition from having taken on a major leadership role in the department, an administrative role in the department, to support their time as they move back into more research or scholarship. In terms of status-only faculty, this is for people who are not clinical faculty, who are salaried. And the idea here is to buy 1 day a week of the awardee's time. And so it would be for 20% of their salary and benefits, up to the maximum of $50,000 per annum for an assistant professor and $60,000 per annum for someone who's at associate or full professor rank. The same duration criteria for clinical faculty apply, but the employer and the manager of the person who's applying must commit to freeing up that 1 day per week, which would normally be time spent for service, and providing clinical service, they must be committed to freeing up that 1 day per week. And as I say, Christo Langto will talk about this in a little more detail about the requirements for this. We did include an income threshold for people. The principle of the ASA is to free up time and is not to supplement people's income. And so in order to ensure that people are freeing up sufficient time for academic work, we set a threshold of $450,000 in gross professional income, so that if you exceed this amount in a year, then the corresponding amount of the ASA will be withheld. So for example, if you, have a gross income of $470,000 and you're an assistant professor in the first 3 years, then your ASA for that following year would be $30,000. And so, and again, the reason for doing this is to try and ensure that people put enough time aside for their academic activity, and this not simply growing their income. In terms of the application itself, there are various components which we'll talk about in more detail. But the two primary components are the career development plan, which is 3 pages in length, and the academic work plan, which is 3 pages in length. So this is just to remind people that this is a career development award. So for people, for example, applying on the research plank, this is not simply an operating grant. So there's an equal weighting to someone's career development plan as well as a plan for their academic projects. And as I say, we'll come back to this in more detail in a little while. In addition, the applicant's CV needs to be included. There's a disclosure of professional income for the 2 previous years, or if someone has been a fellow and is applying in their first year or second year as an assistant professor, then their full income for the full year prior to that. But this is essentially, again, to get a sense of how much support people are already receiving, although that is not an exclusion factor for people being given the award, but we want to get a sense of how people are spending their time and how they're getting paid for that time, and also just to serve as a baseline, because at each annual renewal, people are required to submit their professional income statement for the year before. Again, to give us a sense of that people are putting aside enough time for their academic activity. Every applicant requires a letter of support from their psychiatrist in chief. And in addition, for those who are status only, the letter of institutional commitment. If an assistant professor, we put a lot of weight in the application on mentorship and the mentor's letter of support as well as the mentor's CV. And we'll talk about the mentorship in a little while, but certainly mentorship is not confined to being an assistant professor. Mentorship is something that continues throughout one's professional life, but it's particularly important for people starting out in their careers to have a mentor, someone who can guide them and provide support as they're developing their academic careers. In terms of the review and adjudication process, this is a 3-step process. So there's a thorough process and there's a transparent process for how the awards, the applications get reviewed and adjudicated. So the first is there's an internal review by the department's executive. So all applications are independently reviewed by 2 members of the executive. They're scored according to a template. There are some written feedback provided for the applicant. in terms of strengths and areas for development. Once those reviews have been done, they're collated and reviewed collectively by the executive at one of the department executive meetings. The highest ranked applications are then sent out for external review. And so these are people external to the University of Toronto. They are senior faculty in other university departments, usually psychiatry, but some other departments as well across the country. So up until now, we've used faculty from Canadian universities. And again, they are asked to rank, to score on the template, as well as provide written comments. Those scores and comments are received in early June. And again, the executive reviews those, and then taking into account the internal reviews and the external reviews, decisions are then made about which applications receive awards. So, as I noted, there's weighting towards funding going to assistant professors. So that's one thing that's taken into consideration. The primary criterion there is merit of the application. And the merit is decided in separate streams for both research applications and for the education and CPA applications, because different criteria and parameters apply when reviewing those applications. And so we look at them in separate streams. And then other factors are considered as well, in addition to merit, and those are spread across university divisions, hospital sites, and departmental priorities, such as priorities linked to the strategic plan. And then a decision is made about which of the applications will be funded. And in terms of the timeline, the deadline is March 5th for applications, and the awards are announced in mid-June. So people, both people who are successful as those who haven't been successful, are all notified. And then successful applicants are asked to sign a letter of award. And so funding will start in July 1st of each year. And then, as I noted, a renewal is dependent on a satisfactory annual progress report, which are requested in the spring of the following year. And again, these are reviewed by members of the executive, and there are 2 reviews of each progress report, and discussed at the executive meeting, and then awardees will get feedback, written feedback, as to the progress they've been making and any suggested areas for further development. So, so that is an overview of the actual ASA and some of the objectives and the rules governing the ASA and the timelines and so on. So what we're going to do is we're going to leave plenty of time at the end for questions and discussion. So if you have questions, I suggest use the chat function, and then we can address those questions at the end of the presentations. So now what I want to do is move on to just talking about some tips for research applications. And so just some general points. This is not just in terms of the research applications, but it's for all the ASA applications, as well as writing grant applications or other scholarly applications as well. So the first thing is to leave sufficient time for the application, for thinking about what you are going to propose and write, for planning, for consulting with other people, for consulting with your mentor, for consulting with collaborators, and then for writing the application. The call for applications was sent out in early January, So there was approximately a 2-month timeline between that and the application deadline, and people were encouraged to start on their applications prior to this workshop to start getting the ball rolling, because it does take time to as I say, to conceive of and plan and consult and write these things. This is not something that can just be done in a couple of days to end up with a competitive application. The other point is just to read and follow the application instructions. So the points I made, the general points I was making before about the ASA are all included in the request for announcement that was sent out in January, which is a fairly detailed announcement. And particularly when it comes to the various sections of the application, there are some details there that you do really need to read and follow them. And there are some headings, for example, under the career development as well as the academic plan, that you can cut and paste and use to guide the various sections of your application. There are, I'm not quite sure the status yet, but there are certainly some successful ASA applications which will be available for people to read with the permission of the awardees, and they're worth reading to get a sense of what a successful application has been like. But in addition, especially if you're submitting grant applications, but if you're also submitting applications for scholarship and education CPA, if you could ask your mentor for examples of successful grant applications to read as well, to give you a sense. I mean, they may not be career development applications, but just to give you a sense of how a successful grant application is structured and written. The other important thing is to really, if you're an assistant professor stage, to involve the mentor early and regularly. So the mentor should be included not only for when you get the award, but also for as you're actually preparing the application. And so this is part of the mentorship process, is for the mentor to be involved early on in terms of helping you develop ideas, put the ideas down on paper, and then doing regular reviews on the drafts and feedback. They should obviously not be the ones writing the application. I mean, that's your job to be doing. But at the same time, it's too late if you leave your application for the mentor's feedback until a couple of days before it's due. To then make your revisions. You need to be involving the mentor from an early stage with regular feedback. And this is the same also if you're putting in a grant application. And again, if you're thinking of collaborators and co-investigators and so on, or people with particular areas of expertise that you need to consult, make sure you also consult with those people early and get their input early. So the career development, so as I say, that the main parts of this that's going to require your work is the career development plan and the academic plan. And the career development plan has 4 components. The applicant's academic and professional background. So this is where you have got to at the present time. Then your goals and objectives, and you should be thinking about this over the duration of the award and beyond. But in terms of the written document, in terms of the duration of the award, so as I say, if you're successful in getting promoted, then we're talking about a 6-year period, but certainly over the 5-year period. Any plans for specific career development and training activities, such as coursework or workshops or areas where you need to develop expertise. And then the fourth component is the plan for mentorship. And again, this is something you should be doing in collaboration with your mentor in terms of how you're going to formulate this plan. So just to think about these areas individually, in terms of your background and career goals, I mean, this should be a fluid process. So think about your career trajectory. Think about where you have got to at the current time, and then where your career trajectory is going to take you. And as I say, the overarching goal of these awards is to facilitate people doing scholarship to the point where they can get promoted, either as an associate or full professor. And so some of the key benchmarks for promotion for an associate professor is what is your national reputation and recognition, and for a full professor in terms of your international recognition. So when you're thinking about the ASA, you should be thinking about it in terms of your career trajectory, and how are you going to get, for example, if you're an assistant professor, how are you going to get to a point of being nationally recognized? And if you think about it in this way, you can sort of create this narrative of your career trajectory, which then allows you to describe both your short-term goals as well as your longer-term goals. And this does require some focus, and it requires some thinking about what are you going to be known for when you are applying for promotion. And how will the ASA enhance your career development in addition to other support that you receive? So I think many people will already be receiving some other support, and this is to augment that support. And so it's important to be able to think about how will the ASA enhance the support that you're already getting, or if you're not getting any support at all, in what way will you be able to use the ASA to potentially leverage other support from other areas? And what's also very important about thinking about your career trajectory is also to have some specific timeline with milestones, and this should be specific. It shouldn't just be a sort of vague timeline about what you think you might be doing, but really some specific points with milestones that you will anticipate achieving during those 5 to 6 years. In terms of training activities, so the ASA is not designed to support people obtaining a graduate degree. So the expectation is that, as I said before, people who are applying for an SA are at a minimum of an assistant professor. Many, if not most, would have done a fellowship or would have been part of the clinician scientist program during their training as a resident. And the expectation would be that you would have actually, if you're going to do a graduate degree, you would have actually obtain that degree before you would be applying for an ASA. So the ASA is not to support time solely to be doing a degree. But that doesn't preclude people from gaining extra training or expertise through things like courses and workshops, etc., to develop their knowledge and their skill set. But again, you need to be specific about this. One of the limitations of some applications is that tend to be too general. And if you're going to be doing coursework or workshops, you need to be able to show the reviewers that you actually thought this through, and be specific about what courses, who will be delivering the courses, and what skills and knowledge you hope to acquire that will be helping you develop your career. Again, with a mentorship plan, you need to be specific. So sometimes people are too general in their description about mentorship. And what reviewers are looking for is they really want to know, I mean, so who will the mentors be? If there's more than one mentor, if there should be a primary mentor, but there may be more than one mentor. And what is their academic focus? And is their focus something that's aligned with what you plan to be doing for your career development? The length of time you've known the mentor, whether you've worked with them, whether there's been academic productivity in your relationship with them, and how frequently you're going to be planning to meet with them, and what you hope to attain through the meetings, through the mentorship meetings. And then really giving an indication of how will the relationship with the mentor facilitate your development in terms of the mentor's experience and expertise and reputation and own academic productivity. So again, this is a conversation that you need to have with your mentor and ask for their assistance in sort of developing this mutual plan to help you move forward. In terms of the academic work plan, there are two elements again to this. There's an overall plan, an overarching plan for the 5 to 6 years, as well as your specific plans. And when it comes to research, this is your specific research projects. So the specific research projects should fit within a framework, and there should be a coherence to the projects within this framework. And so what's going to be the overarching goals and the rationale for these goals? And you need to be realistic. There's one of the difficulties that some people get into is there's just too much. There's just too many things, and it doesn't really fit in well into one or two major themes. Are there going to be methodologic foci for the research projects? Where you'll be collaborating with other people or requiring advanced training and skills to develop some of these areas of methodological expertise as well. And what's the research environment going to be like, and who are the teams, and who are going to be the team members and the collaborators? So these are some of the sort of overall issues that provide the framework for the more specific plans. And then when you get down to your specific research projects, you again need to be realistic in the number and scope and time frame of the projects. So it's unrealistic, I think, for the 5 or 6 years, especially at assistant professor level, to be suggesting that you're going to be doing and completing 6 or 8 projects during that time. But this is what some people do propose in their applications. And it's just too many. It's just too many to be realistic. So you have to think about, how in terms of collecting pilot data, applying for other funds such as operating funds based on those pilot data, and the time that you have available both through the ASA as well as other funding for your academic time, what's going to be achievable within the time frame that we're talking about. There's going to be less detail, obviously, than if you have an operating grant application describing one project. But having said that, each project should be evaluable on its own merits. And so for research projects, you do need to include specific aims and hypotheses for each project. And you need to have a methodology and data analytic plan that's aligned with the aims and hypotheses. A couple of lines to describe a project without any aims and hypotheses, without any real methodological plan and so on, is going to come up short. As I say, each project, even though it's not going to obviously going to be the length of an operating grant proposal, it needs to give enough detail that can be evaluated on its own merits. So I think I've reached the end of my presentation. So at this point, I'm going to hand it over to Sanjeev to continue on and talk about education and CPA.
All right, I'm just about to put this into full screen here. Are you able to see my screen here?
Yep.
Yeah, perfect. All right, so I will build on Alistair's presentation, specifically the research component, and my focus will be on CPA, or creative professional activities and education. But as per the comment in the chat there by Benoit, I think there'll be a lot of overlap and reinforcing concepts and ideas in terms of preparing the ASA application. So I just want to start off with CPA, and then I'll cover education. I do think CPA is often a little more difficult for people to grasp, as there's a bit more areas and possibilities in terms of areas of focus for CPA. So I do think it's important for people to even just take a look at the promotions manual, to think about types of CPA and evaluation. To the previous presentation, the goal of the ASA award is to support promotion, really academic development towards promotion. And so again, important to think about how a CPA activity might fit in that. And there are several examples of CPA. One could be quality improvement, which is embedded within CPA. And again, many people will talk about quality improvement, but I encourage people to think about how they're using QI methodology or science in a way to implement change or evaluate improvements. And so it's important that if you're using that as one of your areas of focus for CPA, that you're aware of that science and methodology. The other is kind of innovative programs or standards or practices, and that could be clinical or education. And I think that could be confusing, but there are education programs that could be CPA, like patient education programs, or CPD, that might be continuing professional development, that might be another innovative program, but also clinical programs, whether it's implementing a new integrated virtual care program, for example. And the key here is you are also implementing and evaluating and using a scholarly approach, which means there are some measurable impact. And I think impact is measured in some of the traditional means, whether it's peer-reviewed publications, disseminations, some sort of funding or grants, but also non-traditional, like, for example, number of patients, reach, the adoption and spread of that model to other areas, and other metrics, whether it's kind of knowledge translation, like websites and usage data, for example, being another potential metric. And then last is advocacy and policy change. And again, it's really thinking about beyond one's organization. And again, what's the system impact, the impact on patients and practice? How many people are being impacted by this policy change? What are the practice changes, and how widely is it spread? And what is the peer-reviewed dissemination? And many of these are non-traditional peer-reviewed dissemination reports, for example, policy documents, panels, and so on. And so these are important ways, again, to establish national and international recognition. Just some tips for CPA is really alignment is key, similar to what Alistair had said for research. Really talking about your past experiences, how your work from whether it be program development, advocacy, or QI has really informed your current goal that you're proposing or vision. And are the proposed initiatives aligned? And again, I will continue to reiterate that point. We really see challenges with applications when people are putting together multiple projects, but they don't fit under the vision or overarching goals. Again, being realistic with the timelines and objectives. Are they clear and feasible in terms of timeline? Again, less is more, with having more focus and detail with each of those initiatives. Again, for CPA, really important, whether it's QI or more broadly, partnerships and collaborations to support this work. This is often system change. And so, doing it independently with a smaller group is not going to result in spread or even impact. And so that's an important piece. Being clear about the methodology being used. And so, you know, in QI, for example, there are different tools being used, but often quantitative or qualitative or mixed methods. And if you're not familiar, important to think about how you build out your team of mentors and collaborators, or how you articulate in your application that you will be addressing those methodological gaps. Thinking about your evaluation plan, so outcome measures, and also sustainability, right? Again, we're moving away from independent projects, but how are each of these projects building on one another towards your vision, and how will it be sustained so it can be spread more broadly? And then again, articulate your credibility to carry out the work. So really create that narrative. What's been your past scholarship in this area, the CPA activities? Do you have any pilot data, or have you piloted a service or model, or done some of the QI work already on a smaller scale? And again, what methodological expertise or content expertise do you have? Have you been trained, finished some training in a particular area, formed a partnership or collaboration that you're going to leverage for the ongoing work? And again, thinking about how you seek out mentors to establish that, and also professional development opportunities. Are there courses or programs you're going to take to bolster some of your expertise, for example, on qualitative type of research methodology or further QI tools or skill sets? So I'm just going to show you a quick example that here's one on the good example here, a proposal for an integrated virtual psychosocial model in binge eating disorder, obesity, really kind of disseminating some existing work on a pilot that this person's going to do. They're going to create a new model of this psychosocial intervention that includes a little MI variant, and they're going to implement and evaluate it. And then they're going to create a training program on this new model to start to train family health teams. Whereas the other one is a bit broad in terms of the goal. It's really to create a general integrated mental health services model, but there's a lot of components like literature review and consultation and writing this up, this pilot program, disseminating it. Then they're going and doing a screening tool, and they're evaluating an integrated program with the screening tool and the interventions, and they're going to create a training program. You could see in a timeline, this is going to be really hard to articulate in terms of the methods in a robust way, and also to complete. It's just going to take too long, and I think some reviewers will say it's non-specific. The goal is trying to accomplish too much and not feasible within the timeline. So again, just a contrast to think about tightening up. What's your goal, or and how are you going to advance your specific program of scholarship? Tips for QI specifically: really outline your QI experience or formal training. You really need a support from your institution, because QI does not happen in an isolated clinic. It's often embedded in a larger system. So what are the structures? How are you going to get hospital support, for example, or another organization's support for data collection? What are the specific aims and outcome measures? Seeking a mentor with QI expertise. I will say for mentorship, it's obviously within the department is ideal, but there are many people within the Faculty of Medicine that you could probably bring in if you need additional expertise, and QI could be one of those. And then there is something called the Squire Guidelines, which are used for publications in peer-reviewed journals for QI. And although that's very specific to one particular project, I would look at that checklist because it helps you identify, are you describing the population, the specific measures, and so on, in a very good way to look at it as a checklist as you're describing each of your initiatives for quality improvement. So I'd use it as a kind of template to say, have I talked about each of these areas in some of my methodology and evaluation outcomes? So maybe another tool. And just for education scholarship includes research and innovation in health professions education. There are ways we define scholarship in education. There's like discovery, which is original research, so advancing and creating new knowledge. Sometimes might be bringing in new disciplines or theories like sociocultural theories into medical education. and these are often integrative into reviews or analyses. There's application, so you might have a new program that you're developing and trying to advance, and in terms of implementation evaluation, it could be a new competency-based curriculum, for example, and so how you might implement that and evaluate that, building on the literature. And a new teaching technique, maybe you're doing a new virtual teaching method that's quite novel, or a simulation that you want to study in a variety of settings and show systematically how it optimizes learnings. So again, building on existing literature, making it public, so disseminating it somewhere, and it should be peer reviewed, whether it's publications or in other peer reviewed scholarship areas. So like MedEd portal, you can actually get peer reviewed education programs as another academic metric. And again, I won't belabor the point, but alignment is key with your vision. Really, how does your past experiences align with your future goals? I will say ensure your methodology, and this is one of the areas where we've seen some challenges, is that people are putting together education projects, but be clear about the education theory and frameworks that you're basing this on and how it's going to advance the field. If it's been done before, it's probably not going to reach national or international profile, right? So if you're not sure, seek a mentor or someone who has some education research expertise, or get a consult early on. And then clearly state the significance of the innovation. How is it going to contribute and build on this? And outline plans for dissemination. Again, more formal scholarship, publications that you're going to write up, presentations, and how it might be generalizable. So if you're creating a new assessment tool in education, how will other programs in Ontario, maybe through COPE and other residency programs across Canada, use this as a way of dissemination? And how will you leverage your mentorships and collaborations to achieve that? And then think about sustainability. If it's a broad scale curriculum, how is this going to continue beyond the implementation of your work? And again, I will just echo Alistair's point. You probably don't want to seek a mentor days or a week before. You want to do this early, develop this iteratively together, and make sure your mentor is going to be available throughout. I will say that we have Certina Ho in our department, who is our Director of Scholarship and Program Evaluation, who is happy to provide a consultation in the department. And if you have an education leadership role, think about how you can leverage that to support your development and implementation or sustainability plan. You might be in that role, and that might be a way for you to spread or make those partnerships, or leverage committees that might be able to help further expand the scope and impact of a project. And then lastly, here's a resource about how do you develop an education research grant. It takes you through many of the things I've talked about in a very helpful way. Probably the budget's not important for this because this is a career development award, but there are many things about good objectives, good methodology, and basing it on the literature. So I think those are important points. I just will say there are many professional development opportunities in education, whether you need specific skills that you need to pursue, scientists to consult at the Wilson Center. The Center for Faculty Development has many courses that you might take. Education Scholars Program, if you've completed it, for example, that might be something to mention. There are courses through the Center for IP and CPD offices, and many of the hospitals have education research labs or units. Important to leverage this because, again, another concern is doing a lot of this project for education scholarship alone and not having a good team outside of maybe a mentor. And so making sure that it's embedded in a broader team helps communicate that this is going to be implemented and sustained. And then there are also professional associations, both for dissemination and further professional development. So I will stop there.
Great, so I'm up next. I have the joy of going third, which means that most of the stuff has been covered. Share. Can everyone see that well? Okay. So I want to, beginning. here we go. So Academic Scholar Awards, and I'm going to be going over very briefly the issues for status only. You know, really, I didn't know that I was a status only appointee until, you know, fairly recently. So I thought I'd start out with a definition of status only, and it only comes up in some of the fine paperwork like we're seeing today. Status only members are faculty members in the Department of Psychiatry, and they have the skills and expertise to advance the academic mission of the department. But they're employed outside of an AFP. If you're in an AFP, you know what it is. It's an alternative funding plan, and that's the contract between academic physicians, teaching hospitals, universities, the OMA, and the Ministry of Health for Long-Term Care that sets out the non-fee-for-service funding. So it's remuneration for medical staff, academic physicians, for clinical service, education, research, and associated administration. So the status only are employed outside of that. So they end up being quite a heterogeneous group. It's mostly comprised of PhDs, RNs, PharmDs, and other allied health. The difference is they're usually paid, people like me are usually paid by a research institute, but in fact we have various sources of salary and funding models. So we're really a heterogeneous group when it comes to our funding. The ASA goals are exactly the same as what you've heard. It's merit-based, it's to support professional development. The priority for early career and mid-career faculty members remains, and the goal is academic promotion. What is different is just the protected time. You have to be, of course, a full-time faculty member of the department, but in this case, the award is going to buy 1 day per week of academic time from the awardee's employer. So the employer and the awardee's manager are required to protect this time for the awardee's academic activity. That's the same, but the amount is going to be based on your salary. And of course, your employer and the awardee's manager have to ensure that the time is not used by the awardee for clinical activity, administration, or teaching. So because of that, a lot of status-only faculty already receive salary support to protect more than 80% of their time for academic activity. They would not be eligible for an ASA. Many people have 100% funding through their research institute. So that means that only a small percentage of status-only faculty need this funding to do research and scholarship. So a lot of people don't qualify. For example, there have been 39 ASA awards since its inception in January 2018. And we have had status-only people awarded, but there was one in January 2018 and one in the July 2018. So we have had 2 status-only ASAs awarded. Alistair already brought this up. There's one major difference in the application process, and that's the letter of institutional commitment that's required. And just like, you know, as part of grantsmanship and something we all have to think of for grants or writing an ASA, you have to follow the rules. So there are 5 specific points that the letter of institutional commitment has to cover. First is the attestation. They have to attest that 1 day per week of the applicant's time will be released for the proposed academic activity, and that will be for the duration of the award. Second are the actions taken. It has to describe the actions to ensure that the applicant can have that 1 day per week of protected time. For example, what specifically will be done, a reduction in the applicant's teaching load or clinical load. And then, you know, to make it believable, just like with any grant, you have to put in the details so that they know that you've taken this seriously and it's believable. You have to describe, the letter has to describe how this will be accommodated. They're going to hire additional staff, they're going to reassign staff, etc. Of course, it has to be dated and signed by both the applicant's manager and the employer, and those people have to be authorized to commit the institution. And finally, it has to be printed on the applicable institutional letterhead. So just like everything, if you don't read the instructions and follow them, it will be rejected. Letters that don't meet the above requirements will not be accepted. And just a bit about the amount, you saw that there are standard amounts for ASA for people who are part of an AFP, but for status only, it's going to be equivalent to 20% of the awardee's salary plus benefits. So again, it's to protect 1 day per week. For example, if your salary was $125,000, the award would reimburse the employer for 1 day a week or $25,000 plus benefits, which might be, 25%, so $7,500. And it's normally for 3 years. And the length of the award is the same as Alistair already described. It starts with assistant professors. If you remain at that rank during the term of the award, you're eligible for the original 3-year award, plus another 2-year renewal based on your academic process. So that would give you 5 years. However, the longest award is 6 years. If you're promoted to associate professor during the 3 plus 2-year term of the award, you can be eligible for a 6th year of the award. For associate professors, you're eligible for a 3-year award with no renewal, and the shortest is for full professors, and we heard that there are very restricted criteria to apply for that, and you meet criteria, you are eligible only for 2 years of an award. And those are really the only differences. Everything else applies, and the same principles apply about being specific and following the guidelines for the regulations. We're going to take questions at the end, but I also have a UToronto email address that you can use if necessary. And that's it for me.
So thank you, Krista. Thank you, Sanjeev. Thank you, Alistair. I think we're perfectly on time, and we may even be finished with the formal presentation early. So some of you have put some questions in the chat. I've tried to respond as they come. We may echo them if there is no other question, but I would encourage you to put your question in the chat, and Alistair can monitor the chat during the next 20 minutes, and then he will facilitate the question session. So, I don't have slide, and it's on purpose because I'd seen the slide of my colleague, and I think they are making all the point I would want to make. So during the next 15 minutes, I'm going to echo or emphasize a few things that they told you. And the reason I picked those is because we have now been going for, you heard 39 people got funded, so we probably have seen 80 applications, and we have learned something from the people who get funded and the people who don't get funded. So first, at a very general level, and that's true for all of you who are starting your career and want to apply for grant, and I've had a lot of grant during my life, and I've had more grant rejected than grant funded, okay? And my total funding is about $170 million. So it's not as if I've not been successful, but to get $10 million funded, you need to apply for 30. So it's true for the ASA award. Most people will need to submit 2 times, some people 3 times. If you say to me, who are the people who get funded the first time? They're typically of people who have done an advanced degree, an MD and a PhD, and have done a 2 to 3 year fellowship. And then during their fellowship, they get some external funding, like a NARSAD award. And then they go on faculty and they submit a project related to their NARSAD award. And they have 10 or 20 publications. So I'm not saying nobody gets funded the first time, but I'm saying the people who get funded the first time is people who have started their research career before. Somebody who does a residency, graduate, even in a CSP, and graduate from the residency and decide not to do a fellowship will probably should wait a couple of years to submit an ASA award, and may have to submit it a couple of times. So in the end, they would be getting their ASA award 3-4 years after graduating from residency, which is not dissimilar to somebody who did a 3-year fellowship and got it the first time. And now this being said, do not send a half-baked application. If you do that, it's true for all the grant. You are going to waste one of your 3 chances. And when you have submitted 3 times, you're done. So it's better, if you believe you have an application that's not ready, to delay 1 year. academic life is a marathon. It's not a sprint. And with the ASA award, you're going to have, if you are successful and you get promoted, you're going to have 6 years of support. So if somebody spent 10 years being an assistant professor, there is nothing wrong getting your ASA award on the fourth or the third or fourth or fifth year. And remember, if you get promoted, you get your ASA get increased, and so you get a little bit more money. So that was one thing. So one thing that you heard is preparation. I had a mentor when I was young who would start working on a grant. Now it's an extreme case, it's like a bell curve. He would start working on a grant a couple of years before the submission date. And that sounds crazy, but if you have to go to REB, you have to get pilot data, you have then to analyze your pilot data, publish them, write your grant, 2 years, 3 years is not that unreasonable. Most people start 6 to 8 months before the deadline. And I know a few people who try to write their grant in 2 weeks and who have been able to get away with it. There are people who have special talent and can do some things that all of us cannot do, but that's not a good model. So like what you heard from Alistair, if you are serious of applying for your ASA award for this cycle, this spring, you should really have been starting to talk and think about it in the fall. And this workshop is probably more for, is people who are not sure or are wondering and are attending the workshop. That means really you're preparing for next year's submission. Example of thing that Alistair gave, and that I can tell you, think maybe a third of the application who are sunk is the award, and I'm focusing on the award for assistant professor. Some of those things apply for associate, but the vast majority of the award we give are for assistant, and the vast majority of you are assistant professor. And the only associate who are eligible is people who, because they joined the department later in their career or because they were promoted early before it existed, never got an assistant professor award. So for an assistant professor, if we don't see in the application the influence of a good mentor, we are not going to give you an award that's to support you to work for the next 3 years with your mentor. And it's very clear to us that some people write a letter, the mentor signed it, and the mentor did not read the application. And the application is bad because the mentor is a very successful funded researcher. But if she didn't read the application and didn't give you feedback, it will show. And if it shows, you're not going to get the award. So in order to select a good mentor, engage them, meet with them 3 or 4 times, you need to start at least 6 months before. And again, Dr. Flint also in some of those slides mentioned that many applications who get rejected the first time is because they are way too vague. People say, I will work with my mentor. That's not good enough. If you say, for the past 6 months, while preparing this application, I've met my mentor monthly. With the funding of this application, I will meet with my mentor twice a month. And over the next 3 years, here are the things I will do with my mentor. And the first year will be supervised reading, leading to the publication of a review on X. The second year will do this. The third year will do that. Describe to us, that's the level of granularity. When people ask me, what level of granularity do you need in a grant application? And I've been a reviewer for NIMH and 20 plus years, and for CHR 15 some years. And I'm going to spend the next 3 days, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, reviewing. And I have been given 7 applications as a reviewer. There will be 40. And I can tell you, it's the same thing. So I'm always amazed by the fact that people spend some time, but they don't tell us in the application how they will do things. And the level of detail, I say, think about a cookbook. If I give you a mastering of the art of French cooking, you should be able to open it on the page souffle without ever have done a souffle. I'm not saying your souffle will be like what a chef who was trained for 20 years, but you should be able to serve a souffle to your family. And you want No more, no less. Too much detail will hurt you. None of that detail will hurt you. You have a page limitation. Other high-level comment about people who didn't get funded. In Canada, we have very few career development awards. There used to be an NIH a CHR early investigator award. Some people have applied for fellowships, but in general, people know and train and write operating grant. So people do not know, people kind of put all their eggs in the basket of describing their project or project with an S, I will come back to it, and they don't spend enough time working on the career development. Please, and this is a career development award. So if the career development is not good, even if the project is fantastic, you're not going to get the award. And the two, again, a word that Dr. Flint used, coherence, I use congruence. I say to people, when you write a grant, it's the reader, the reviewer won't even realize what you have done. But if you have a good grant, you will have done that, you will have lulled their brain. If you speak on page 3 of participant, have on page 12 the word participant. If you peel a subject, have the word subject. I prefer participant, which is more modern, but it doesn't matter. But don't talk to me if you talk about people, so people with schizophrenia or person with schizophrenia or individual with schizophrenia, pick one, use it through the grant. And individual or people or person is the general population of all the people who have schizophrenia. When you say patient, those are people who have schizophrenia and present to hospital. And a participant, those are the one who went to an hospital and signed an informed consent form. So use those terms precisely. And if you use one, use it throughout the application. So that's the level of detail and obsessionality. If you are not obsessional, and again, it's like a Goldilocks. Remember my cookbook. Not too much, but if you don't have enough, you're not going to cut it. So the balance between the career development award and the research or the scholarship piece for those of you who are going to go on CP and education, and the fact that the two are congruent. A reminder that at U of T, if you have an advanced degree like a master or a PhD, during medical school or during residency or after, you meet criteria for an assistant professor. So do not write an application where your career development is going to do a master in education or a master about this, because that means, fine, we encourage you, that's great, you should do a master, but we are not going to pay for it. If at the end of the master, you will meet the criteria for appointment as an assistant professor that you may meet through other pathway. But so you don't tell us that you want to do an advanced degree. It's not a career development. But if you tell us, I need to learn more, whatever, coding for my AI project, and I will go and spend during year 2, 3 days or a week in the UK at Oxford for the AI coding for a bio researcher, that's a career development that's appropriate to the level of an ASA. I will consult with Dr. Smith at the university at UBC and with an expert in this, and I will work with him on that project. So that's a kind of career development. People do not really understand career development. And again, Alistair talked several times and Sanjeev about criteria for promotion. I want to explain something about this. The goal of the essay is not really to mentor you so that you get to promotion, but we use the promotion as a yardstick. We say, if you spend 6 years or 3 to 6 years of your life doing some scholarly activity, at the end, you should be ready for promotion to associate professor. And if you are not, that's probably that there was something wrong about those 6 years. So we use that as saying it's not promotion for the sake of promotion, it's promotion as a kind of external validation that what you did during your ASA was good and valued by a promotion committee in the department and at the level of the Faculty of Medicine. So and that's why we tell you, if you want to know where you end up, Yogi Berra said, if you don't know where you're going, you're not going to get there. So if you know where you want to end up, and the end up is at the end of your essay or at some time during essay being ready for promotion, you take the promotion manual, look at the criteria, and then write your essay, reverse engineering it to say, okay, if I'm 5 years from that goalpost of promotion, and at the end of 5 years, I need to do all of this, what are the career development activity I need to do to get there? And what project do I need to get there? So I have talked about the emphasis on promotion criteria, the fact that you need to submit 2 to 3 times if you are the typical candidate. A couple of things that you heard a couple of times, but I will tell you a third time. I am always stunned to see that some people do not read the instruction. And if in the instruction there is a sentence saying that Dr. Flynn Patty spent a lot of time on those instructions, think of my cookbook, say you need a timeline, and I see an application without a timeline, from my perspective, you are not going to get your grant. They say, we want a timeline, you don't have a timeline, you will not get your grant. So if CHR say we want a power analysis, there is no power analysis, you're not going to get your grant. So my advice to my mentees, take the instruction, cut and paste them in a Word document, put them in yellow, and some of those things will be, and then start, of course, erasing some stuff, but at some point you will have a section called timeline, underlined, bolded, and below that, and the timeline could be a graph, it could be a table, it could be just a paragraph which say, the first year I will do this, the second year I will do that. I like table with several columns, so you have because I'm a concrete person, so you have the year 2021, 2022, you may even divide it in part. There is a second column describing the career development activity, a third column describing the research project, and another final column with kind of the deliverable, what will come out of those things. So read the instruction, and actually my advice is cut and paste them and use them as the outline of your application. And for those of you like me, have the kind of the phobia of the white page, it's very hard for me to start a grant or a paper by cutting and pasting something. If I need to have whatever 3,000 words and the instruction are already a couple hundred, I am already there, and it's my outline. I've emphasized that we want to see the selection of the mentor, the relationship with the mentor is a proof of quality and that you thought about it. If it's poorly described, that reflects poorly on you and your application on the mentor. I've talked about the timeline. I've talked about the balance between the two parts. People tend to spend too much time obsessing and preparing about the project, which they do. But and then the first part, which is half of your application, the career development, tend to be weak or way too vague. And the integration, the congruence between the two. And the last point, which is true for every grant, 2/3 of the grant that I'm going to kill during the next 3 days at CHR, the reason I'm going to kill them, it's not that the team is not good, it's not that the concept is not impactful, it's not even necessarily because the methods are not good enough. They are doing too much. Okay, if you claim you're going to do I'm going back to a CHR, but I will come back to the essay. Those people who claim that with 4 years, with $800,000, they will do 4 projects, 4 little projects which are linked. They will recruit a number of people, they will assess them with such and just method, then they will treat them, they will follow them, and then they will integrate everything in a software tool that they will disseminate to predict in the clinic whatsoever. Those people are dead. They will never get a grant. And by the way, they don't have enough page to describe any of those two. So step 1, if there are 4 steps, if they had step 1 and 2, 2 or 3 or 3 or 4, any of those would have done a fundable grant. When they put the 4 together, they kill the grant. Even 3 is probably too much. So my advice for the essay is to have 2 projects. If you are the ideal candidate whom I describe, who has done 3-year fellowship, had got an ARSAD funding, your first project is going to be the same thing that you have submitted and that was funded by the NARSAD reviewer, you're simply going to re-summarize the project and explain. Remember, you're not double dipping. The NARSAD give you some operating grant, and they say protect your time to do it, which the NARSAD doesn't do it. So you are going to do that, and you're going to say, that's my first 2 years. And you're going to give a lot of detail for that project. And you're going to brag, by the way, that you are already funded. So the NARSAD, a PSI, an excellence fund, a small NIH or CHR, that's piggybacking on somebody else's big grant that has a big center. Those are the ideal first project. The second project is way more, is less detailed, for instance, doesn't need, because by definition it builds on the result. You say, and let's go back, the person who want to do 1, 2, 3, 4, they describe 1 and 2 in their first project, and they say, and if we are successful, project 2 will be to take a result and create a software tool or an app that's available in the clinic or that's available for other university for my education project. But you are going to not give as much detail. For instance, I agree with Dr. Flynn that the first project need to have aims, testable hypothesis, power if you are doing a research, description of the sample. The second may need a general aim and a brief description, half a page, but not necessarily a power analysis that you cannot do until you have the result of your first project in 3 years. So for me, 2 projects connected, covering the whole 5 years, link with your career development, congruent. If you said your career development is to become a clinical trialist, the 2 projects need to be clinical trial. If you say, I want to become an expert on biomarker for such disorder, then the career development is lab and the biomarker and biostatistic that's when I meet the congruent. But more kill grant application, and it kills him for 2 reasons. First, because it's not credible, and that means you have not thought about it enough and you don't know what you're talking about, and your mentor did not tell you that you cannot do 20 years of work in 5 years. So that's dead on arrival. If we see that, we won't even send it to external reviewer. But even if you're on the border and it goes to external reviewer, the external reviewer will say, we don't have enough detail. You have a page limit. So, and by the way, I say it was the last, but that remind me, at least 20% of researchers die because they have a page limit. I forgot how much it is. And they use 80% of their space to give what I call background and rationale, to argue that their idea is excellent. So it's so important to look at inflammation in schizophrenia, and they spend 3 pages talking about inflammation in schizophrenia to convince me that it's important. And then they have half a page to say, and so if I'm funded, here is a brief description of the project. That the contrary, half a page to say what you're doing is important, unless you do something really bizarre, like when I say bizarre, out of the box. If you do whatever, behavioral therapy for dysmorphophobia, okay, then you may need more space to convince the world that there are a lot of people with dysmorphophobia and behavioral therapy is a way to address it. But if you do medication for bipolar disorder or psychotherapy for depression or evaluation of education curriculum, you don't need to convince the world that, you remember, it's a subspecialty grant reviewed by psychiatrists to have expertise. You don't need to write a page to tell me that schizophrenia is a big disease and that we need progress in treatment development. Half a paragraph, and then use your space to give me more detail about your project. So I think we have about 30 minutes for question. I'm going to pass the mic back to Alistair. As you see, I have a lot of, that's my way of thinking aloud and problem solving. I'm happy to answer some question, or I will jump in anyway for some question that trigger me. So I stop there. Alistair, the mic is back to you.
Thanks, Benoit. So maybe what we could do initially was, while people are maybe thinking about other questions to ask, we can just summarize some of the questions in the chat, because some of them are around common themes. So one thing I'm seeing is some technical questions about the mentor. So questions like, can there be more than one mentor? Does the mentor have to be from U of T? If you're an associate professor and don't need a mentor, what weight is put on collaborators and colleagues? So the first point I would make is a mentor is not synonymous with a supervisor. They certainly, a supervisor could be a mentor, or a mentor could be a supervisor, but they're not exactly the same thing. And the mentor is someone that is going, so you need a primary mentor. You need someone who is going to be with you through the course of the ASA, hopefully through that entire period, and you're going to meet with on a regular basis. And it's not simply going to be around supervision, but other issues that come up with your academic development as well. There may be other mentors that you bring in to do with specific areas that the primary mentor that you have may complement that person or whatever. But I think that the emphasis should be on the primary mentor. If there's other people who are going to enhance the application, then definitely. But I don't think that just simply adding more than one mentor for the heck of it, I don't think is going to necessarily enhance the application. There has to be a reason why you need more than one mentor, but there's no prohibition to having more than one. The mentor doesn't have to be from U of T. But having said that, you do need someone that you're going to see or be in contact with on a regular basis, that you can, collaborate with. So you just have to think about distance. I mean, it's less of an issue, I guess, right now with the remote interactions, using video and so on. But customarily, the mentor has normally been from a member of the department or from U of T. And then there's a question about if you're an associate professor. I think collaborators and colleagues are obviously an important part of the application, no matter what level you're at. Again, it really has to fit in as to how you're building your career and the building of the projects as part of that career development. So definitely not having a mentor would not exclude that as an important part of the application. So I'll leave things there in case anybody has, that was one group of questions that sort of came up around mentorship. Whether anybody else has any thoughts about that or comments?
I think you summarized it well, that they don't have to be from the department, they don't have to be U of T. It's important to have a credible primary mentor, and people will scrutinize it a little bit more. Why would that person at University of Michigan want to spend 1 hour per week or 1 hour every 2 weeks with you? But if you make the case and their letter is convincing and they bring some special expertise, that actually may strengthen your application. One thing, there are candidates who have been successful and have agreed that their application can be shared with applicant privately, if you know that some people talk about themselves and their career. So you can look at successful application and see how people handle this. Some people have mentor in the department, some aren't. It's actually more common than not that people have one primary mentor and describe 2 or 3 other people who bring additional expertise. That also address the associate professor question of Dr. Davis. If you're an associate professor, by definition, at this point, you should be fully independent. So we are not requesting a mentor, a primary mentor, but describing some collaborator would replace what would be the mentor or mentors in the applicant who are assistant professor.
Sanjeev or Krista, do you have anything else you wanted to add to that, or from your points of view?
Oh, and I've been agreeing with you and kind of agreeing with you in the chat. And Benoit, actually, you came up with a key concept. If you do have a mentor who's outside of U of T, you'll get a little bit more scrutiny. So as I said, you'd have to assure people that you have that close relationship and make a case for it, that they have this unique expertise. And I think if you have a well-written plan of meeting with your mentor, that's not a problem.
Yeah, and I've answered in the chat as well. I do think that for some areas of education where there might be some unique expertise, there might be outside our department. There are a few areas in terms of education scholarship. Likewise for QI, we have a handful of people who have QI expertise in our department, but it's growing. But So that might be appropriate as well to see people in the Faculty of Medicine more broadly.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify, it's just an important clarification around the threshold for gross income. So Benoit, the RFA actually lists the ASA as part of the gross income threshold.
Okay, my error. Okay.
So obviously the gross income, if you get an ASA, we wouldn't obviously take your gross income from the year before to then start deducting ASA in your first year, because the ASA is designed to allow you to cut back from other activities. And so again, it's to replace income that you may give up. So the first year that you get your ASA, if your gross income including ASA is more than 450, then above that, the ASA for the second year would be reduced proportionally. Are we all in agreement with that? Just so people are getting the right message? Yep, okay.
By the way, all those things are evolving. It's like their question about associate, and I'm in the midst of typing an answer in the chat. Those things are evolving, okay? So some people have said the 450 is too much, some have said it's not enough. And so as we hear people making the case, you know, again, it's not the Constitution, and we are tweaking things to try to make them better. What I want to say is overall, it has been a successful program. We have funded people. Overall, people who have been funded have been promoted, and we are. I think we are getting good application. Good application do get funded. There are some people who are on the cusp and have to resubmit. There are people who send inappropriate application, and that's why we're doing this workshop.
And there's another technical question about can there be letters from more than one mentor? And I think with the application we've sent, the letter should just be the one primary mentor to keep it a level playing field. Obviously, in your application, you need to describe you have more than one mentor, what you'll be doing with other mentors. But we just want one primary mentor who is going to vouch for the fact they'll be, assisting you and helping with your career development during that time. So just the one letter is what is required. What else? So Benoit, you answered the question about approximately how many ASAs go to associate professors. So generally 2 or 3 a year is the usual range. I mean, I think in general, I think in total we've funded up 10 to 12 awards in total each year. Is that about right?
Chris can tell us.
I showed the graph. It was between 9 and 11. Yeah.
9, 11, yeah. So if you take two or three associate, an occasional full professor, not every year. So you can see that the majority, the bulk of the awards go to assistant professors.
We have funded only one full professor to date. We have received maybe 4 applications. And again, we have tweaked the rule now to clarify there's a transition for people who are going to go from leadership back to departmental leadership, back to scholarship / research. And because many of those people, for instance, if I was stepping down today, I would not be eligible for an ASA because I have a chair, so an Andor chair. So the reality is there are very few full professors will get those awards, a few associate professor. With the new system, now most people in the department should get their ASA award when they are assistant. There are still a few of you who didn't get it because you were promoted before it exists, and you are here today to hear about it. You're eligible. We have tried to tweak the rule. It's not, again, it's not an operating grant. It's not a grant to do a project and to hire RA, to protect your time. There were quite a few questions about that notion of protected time, that getting at the issue of protected time. So because we have limited resources, we have said the department will pay for 1 day a week. to be, according to U of T rule, to be a scientist, you need 4 days a week protected, 80%. And to be an investigator, you need 2 to 3. So the idea, yes, if you submit an essay on research, that's to try to become an investigator, and the department will protect 1 day. It will make your application way stronger if you already have 1 day protected by your practice plan / hospital, or if you're going to be able to get a day if you get the essay. And those things have to be discussed, because again, the external reviewer who will say, how can that person do all that work 1 day a week if they are busy 4 days a week in the clinic? And we go back also to the issue of income. It's not that we are opposed to physicians being rich, but it's because if you spend all that time generating, either if you spend all that time generating income from patient, other project, how are you going to have that time protected? And if you say, oh, I have the time protected, then you're stiffing the people who are paying you the $400,000 or $500,000. So that's the rationale. So yes, your application will be stronger if you claim that you will be able to spend, particularly for researcher, in the world of education, scholarship, or CPA, 1 day a week may be enough. But for most researcher, you're competing with people outside of U of T, like in Quebec, who have a salary support from the Fonds de Recherche du Québec. You know, they have salary support. You're competing to people who are GFTs at UBC or in Alberta and are still in the old model where physicians were salaried to do research. And you're competing with US people who get those awards in the US that support. I had an award similar to an ASA when I was a junior faculty. It support 80% of my time. So you need to, and if you say, well, my department, my hospital cannot do this, you can describe and say, I will see patient 2 days a week and work very hard and generate a good income. My practice plan based on my productivity will give me 1 day. You guys will pay 1 day. And there is 1 day that I self-finance for the next 2-3 years until I have enough productivity to get my own grant and then get more support, or some grant come with salary support. So you can also invest in yourself for half a day, and you say, I will spend 50% on the research and 50% on the clinical and teaching paid by OIP and AFP. So that's again, think of a marathon. Where some people do 2-3 years of fellowship, and during which they make about half the income they will make if they had gone on faculty immediately. So if you have decided to go on faculty immediately, it's not unreasonable to explain that you're going to spend 3, 4, 5 years to build your career. You can unmute yourself and jump in. We have another 15 minutes. The group is very, very silent today, and we won't hold it against you. So some of you I know well and are able to challenge what we say or present different perspective, which is appreciated. That's your chance to talk with us as a group.
Yes, I think we've been through most of the questions in the chat. So if people just want to ask questions out loud.
Okay, if you don't ask question, I will talk. That's the way I am. So another point I didn't make is that notion of for project, too much. Okay, people writing a grant where they describe great work, but work they should be doing during the next 20 years. The project need to be, and I think both Alistair and Sanjeev emphasize that the project, the scope of the project and the breadth need to be doable in 5 years, okay? And with clearly what you will do during the next 3 years, and assuming you're successful, you have 2 more years or 3 more years. So you can describe 5 or 6 years of work. But in the care development, it's perfectly fine to map in one paragraph, again, not 3-page, but where you would want to end up. Okay, it's perfectly fine to say over the next 20 years, I want to solve the problem of treatment-resistant bipolar disorder. Okay, or prediction of suicide. So prediction of suicide cannot be done realistically in 5 years. But if you say, I want to spend my career the next 20, 30 years to do, and I believe that here we first need to understand better the biological and the psychosocial determinant of suicide at the individual level, and that's what this application will focus on. This will lead then to some targeted intervention, and that's where I would see after my promotion, the second part of my career. And the third part is universal prevention, and that's where I want to finish my career in 20 years. In the career development piece, you can paint the picture of what you want to do during your life, and the problem you are addressing, the important problem you're addressing. But if you did that as a project, you would be dead on arrival, because it is not credible that an assistant professor will develop treatment unless you already have one subgroup of suicidal people. So I'm not saying if somebody say, I've done the past 3 years and my mentor has done the past 20 years in self-injury in people with borderline personality disorder, and DBT took us that long, and now we want to tweak DBT. That could be a credible 5-year project. But my goal is to prevent suicide at the population level during the next 5 years, not credible.
It reminds me of Benoit Barry Lebowitz, who used to be the chief of the geriatric psychiatry program at NIH. And he would tell people, junior people, if you have a T-shirt, what are the slogans on your T-shirt? So you should have a slogan on the front and a one on the back. And, so to tell people what it is you're going to be doing in terms of your at least foreseeable career anyway. And it's a sort of striking image. I mean, it's an image that people can relate to. I mean, it's succinct, but it really helps to clarify what it is you want to do, in early and mid-career, in terms of your academic goals. And it's a good way to think about just putting things in a sort of simple way.
And again, echoing then the theme of the promotion, if somebody says, I want to do this, you can cut and paste your career development, and that become the first paragraph of your promotion dossier 5 years from now or 6 years from now, where you say, I want to dedicate my life to prevention of suicide, and during the past 6 years, I've become a national expert on the psychosocial determinant of suicide, and I've published 6 or 7 papers, and I've got my first CHR grant to do that after getting those 2 small grants from the American Suicide Foundation. So think about that analogy also. If you know where you want to finish, reverse engineer and describe in your application how you will get there.
It sounds like a T-shirt analogy resonates with some people. So, Julia, you understand what the T-shirt analogy now alludes to?
Yes, finally. Now I know what he was talking about.
Was that Dan?
Yes, that was Dan.
And you heard it from me 15 years ago. What is going to be written on your T-shirt?
I had someone else, Benoit. Benoit, tell me about 12 years ago.
let's take the example of Dan Bloomberger, who now is a full professor and has an endo chair. So what was written on his T-shirt was when he started his career was brain stimulation for treatment-resistant depression in old people. So that was very focused. Now that is 15 years later, it's a brain stimulation for severe mental disorder. So, but it's still, and another way to think about it, what are you going to be known for? And again, the riffraffing on the promotion, what is you going, if you have a national reputation, a reputation about what? And doesn't matter, by the way, if you're an educator, a CPA, person, scholar, or a researcher, what are you known for nationally when you go for promotion? So some people are getting warmer, which is good. So Satya, what do you want to ask?
Hi, thank you so much. I'm one of those group that's here a couple of years early just to learn about the process for a future application. If I understood correctly, Benoit, I think you said that, you know, not necessarily to apply for like a master's degree per se, and I wouldn't, but I thought you gave an example where you might want to learn a particular method, where it's not a full master's degree, but if you want to build on a particular method, that would be a worthwhile application?
Yeah, so again, there is a, you know, it's like everything else. There is a continuum, and it's not an either or, and it's not black or white. We're talking of the gray. So it's not an application, by the way. No, it would not be a good application. It would be one of the career development activities described in the career development plan. So I gave the example of the person who say Oxford has a yearly course for AI in psychiatry, and on year 2, I will go and spend a week in England to learn about AI in psychiatry, and I will bring it back to analyze the data that I would have gathered during year 1 or 2. That's what I call the right level of career development activity for an ASA. I want you to protect 1 day a week so I can spend the 2 years to get a master in education. No, go and get your master education. When you have your master education, come back to do your career development award. So that's and by the way, that raises another question that has not been asked in the chat, but a couple of people have contacted me because they submitted some award and the reviewers said they are not productive enough. So the reviewers said there is not enough paper, or they were disappointed there is 0 grant. And they told me, I thought that was the ASA award is about. And yes, it is true that, but again, it's the Goldilocks. So if somebody has never done any research and they have never published 1 paper, and they have never even bothered to apply to Excellence Fund in the department to get a small grant of $10,000, they are probably not going to be competitive. Even if they have a great idea and they are very smart and they write a perfect application. And the same way at CHR, people say not enough publication, or you have not had enough this or that. That's because we rank the application and they go to external reviewers, score them. So the person who has done a fellowship or has already been 3 years on faculty and has already published 6 or 7 papers and got a couple of small grants will be ranked, and assuming both application of our quality, will be ranked in front of you. And if you end up number 11 and we have enough money for 7, you're not going to be funded unless you do something so special. So that's, again, Dr. Flynn touched on that earlier. We are using, you know, CHR rank application purely on reviewer and calculate a score, and that's it. Okay. And that's the CHR system because we're a small country and everybody know each other. So they don't want people to be able to lobby. In the US, there is a 2-stage process. There is a scientific review to decide what's fundable and with some scoring, and then it goes in front of council. And council is the director of the NIMH and some stakeholder, and they look at everything from the 1st to 25th percentile. And then they decide who, even though they are going to fund 12th percentile, if you are the 4th person to, if they, for instance, if there is already 4 people who are doing ECT for treatment-resistant depression in older people, they say we don't need, even if you are the 2nd percentile, they say we don't need you. On the other hand, if you are the 22nd percentile, but you are doing suicide in a young patient with bipolar disorder and comorbid substance use, and the NIH says it's a national priority and we have nobody else who wants to do that, they will give you an award at the 22nd percentile. So in the ASA, we do that in the adjudication. We look at the ranking. If your score is good enough to be fundable, we may have, let's say, 12 applications or 11, and we have money for 7. And I'm going to give you an example. If we say there is already 3 people with ASA award who do pharmacotherapy of schizophrenia, but we have nobody who does a rehabilitation in jail for a minority group, you may be 11 and be funded when the number 8 is not funded. We will tell the number 8, by the way, your application was fundable, it was excellent. You were not funded because there are too many people who do, or for instance, the same year we have 2 persons who do pharmacotherapy and schizophrenia, both at CAMH. We'll take the best one who may be number 3. The second best one was number 5. We'll tell them resubmit next year unchanged. We won't send you to review, we'll carry forward your, so that's more waiting list. So we would do this if you have an excellent application, but you're not funded because 2 people in the same hospital want to do the same thing with the same mentor. We will tell you, you don't need to redo an application. We won't send your application next year for external review. We'll carry forward the score. And we cannot guarantee you get funded, because if suddenly 9 people have extraordinary application in front of you, but usually all those people who have been carrying forward are funded. So I want to explain that there is some judgment and there are some priority area. For instance, Sanjeev may want to say a few words about QI. We want to develop in the department a group of faculty who would become the future QI leader in the department and the hospital. And to be honest, we don't get enough application. Some people have been funded at CPA when they were 11 or 12 in the competition, but they were the best CPA application, and we want to develop our CPA investigators. So there is some nuance in the review process. It's not brutal like the CHR purely based on score, but the score are important. If the external reviewers say it's not worth funding, well, even if you have the best CPA or the best QI, we will not fund you.
Benoit, just related to that, there's questions about impact for CPA and not using traditional metrics. And I responded that we would do as we would for promotions. We would use all metrics for CPA that are, I would say, measures of impact, including spread. There's some peer review in some way, not necessarily journal or grant funding, but other ways in which. But I think the key is that it has to be aligned with your mission and vision. It can't be like a hodgepodge of things that don't come together to advance the underlying goal or vision that you've outlined.
Yeah, what the example of that famous guy in internal medicine who does drawing, I always forget his name.
Oh, he's in family medicine, Mike Evans.
But yeah, Mike Evans, the guy, that guy probably doesn't have a lot of publication, is a full professor at U of T. If you have a website and you have 10, and by the way, remember, that would be a goal. If you say, I believe that's a risky strategy, but if you want to say the goal of my project is to develop a website to educate the public about X, and my impact measure will be visit, download, follower, that could be a credible application. It is more risky. Yes, people, and particularly the external reviewer, I think even a good CPA project should publish one paper summarizing it, and it could be in an open journal with a low impact factor. But why wouldn't you, or same thing, if you do education scholarship, why wouldn't you publish your method in academic psychiatry or academic medicine? But where a researcher may be expected over 5 years to publish 12 papers or 15 papers, 3 per year, maybe an educator over the life of the award publishing 2 or 3 papers may be enough. So yes, the metrics are different, and we are willing to consider unconventional metrics because you are the future. That's, we are done, 1 more minute. And you are welcome to redesign psychiatry and the department and challenge stuff. Remember, there is a concept of what I call leading edge, and there is a concept bleeding edge. The bleeding edge is you're so much in advance that people don't understand what you're doing, and they don't fund you and they don't support you. And you bleed, not the. So my advice to my children and my mentees, you want to be the leading edge, not necessarily the bleeding edge. But if you say, if I don't work on that problem, I die or I quit, then take your chance, submit 2-3 times. And by the way, that happened also. The first time people say not enough publication, let's say for a researcher, they write the next time now they went from 3 publications to 6. People say, oh, the publications are good, but could be better. The next year they come back with 9 publications and people say, perfect. So time, time heals all wounds. And my old chair, David Kupfer, who is the editor of was the editor of DSM-5, said there is no problem in academia that cannot be solved with 1 or 2 good publications. So 4 p.m. we are finishing on time. This will be recorded. This has been recorded. It will be on the YouTube channel within, let's say, a week. And you can also send all of us, Krista, Sanjeev, Alistair, or me, email, or all of us, and we'll respond. And we will create a frequently asked questions section that in the future will be on the website for those questions that people ask over and over again. And the chat is going to be downloaded by Chris before we are done. And we will use some of the chat question and response to start the frequently asked question list. Thank you, Alistair, Sanjeev, and Krista for presenting. Good luck to all of you who are applying. And I look forward to read your application later this year or the next couple of years when you feel you are ready. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.